People on death row can sometimes have strange requests for their last meal. Roger Casement. During World War I, he was a diplomat and an Irish nationalist who was hanged by the UK in 1916 for treason. His last meal was sacramental bread as he became a Christian and said, "I want to go to my death with the body of my God as my last meal." Fritz Harman. He was decapitated by guillotine in Germany in 1925 for being a serial killer. He was known as the Vampire of Hanover, the Wolfman, or the Butcher of Hanover. Harman was found guilty of 24 of the 27 murders for which he was tried, and for his last meal he requested an expensive cigar and a cup of Brazilian coffee. Victor Feger. He was hanged in 1963 for murder. He was the final federal prisoner executed in the US prior to the moratorium on capital punishment that was imposed as a result of Furman versus Georgia. He lured a man and murdered him to obtain drugs. He was also the last death row inmate executed in the state of Iowa. He requested a single olive with the pit still in it, hoping that a tree would grow on his grave. Johnny Frank Garrett. He was executed by lethal injection in 1992 in Texas for murder. When he was 17 years old, on October 31, 1981, a Catholic nun was killed, and Garrett was charged with her murder. Sister Tadia Benz, 76 years old, was allegedly essayed, strangled, and murdered by Garrett that morning in the St. Francis convent, according to the prosecution. Garrett, who resided across the street from the convent, was taken into custody on November 9, 1981. He only asked for ice cream as his last meal. David Mason. He was executed in a gas chamber in 1993 in California for murder. Between March and December 1980, Mason, an American serial murderer, killed at least 4 senior citizens. Then his cellmate in 1982, and maybe his male lover as well. He was the last prisoner to be killed in this way in the state when he received a death sentence for these crimes, and was put to death in the gas chamber at San Quentin State Prison in 1993. He was also the first death row convict to voluntarily renounce all of his appeals following the restoration of the capital penalty. He declined a special meal, but chose to have some ice water while waiting in his cell. Matthew Reeves. He was executed by the state of Alabama in 2022 for murder. Reeves was found guilty of the 1996 murder of Willie Johnson Jr., a driver who offered him a ride. He was seen celebrating the murder at a party, according to the evidence. Reeves only asked for a bottle of Sprite before his execution. James Edward Smith. He was executed in 1990 by lethal injection by the state of Texas for murder. On March 7, 1983, Smith shot and killed insurance executive Larry Rojas during a heist inside the second-floor cashier's office close to the Astrodome. Smith was put to death on June 26, 1990, in the early hours. His last words were, "I myself did not kill anyone, but I go to my death without begging for my life. I will not humiliate myself. I will let no man break me." He claimed to have been a former follower of the Hare Krishna belief, as well as a former voodoo priest. For his final meal, he asked for a lump of dirt, which was denied. He settled for a cup of yogurt. John Spengalink. He was executed by electrocution in 1979 for murder. He was the first convicted criminal to be executed in Florida after capital punishment was reinstated in 1976, and the second after Gary Gilmore in the United States. For his final meal, he asked for a flask of Jack Daniels shared with the prison superintendent. John Albert Taylor. He was executed by firing squad in 1996. He was convicted of burglary and carrying a concealed weapon in the state of Florida and essay and murder in the state of Utah. After 11-year-old Charla King was discovered essayed and strangled to death in Washington Terrace, Utah, Taylor's sister called the police and alerted them. At the crime site, which was located in the apartment building where he was staying, his fingerprints were discovered. Before his execution, he asked for antacid medicine, a cigarette, and pizzas with everything. Dobby Williams. He was executed in 1999 by lethal injection. He was convicted of the murder of Sonia Nippers in 1984 and sentenced to death. For his final meal, he had 12 chocolate bars and some ice cream. His last words were, "I just want to say I don't have any hard feelings against anybody. God bless y'all. God bless." His execution was controversial as he was identified to be the murderer only because he had prior burglary charges, and he was seen walking in the area where the killing was committed about an hour prior to the tragedy. Joseph Rudolph Wood III. He was executed in 2014 by lethal injection. On August 7, 1989, Wood fatally shot Deborah Dietz and her father, Eugene Dietz, and was later found guilty of murder and assault. Wood was executed on July 23, 2014, at Florence State Prison in Arizona, following a 2-hour lethal injection operation that was regarded as botched. Wood gasped and snorted for an hour and 57 minutes after the chemicals were delivered, and the entire procedure took almost 2 hours. Experts said the execution should have lasted only 10 minutes. For his final meal, he had 2 cookies. Phillip Ray Workman. He was executed by lethal injection in 2007. He declined a special meal for himself, but he asked for a large vegetarian pizza to be given to a homeless person in Nashville, Tennessee. This request was denied by the prison, but carried out by others across the country. Homeless shelters across Tennessee received massive numbers of pizzas of various toppings from people all over the country, honoring Workman's last meal request. His last words were, "I've prayed to the Lord Jesus Christ not to lay charge of my death to any man." After 2 minutes had passed after the start of the injections, he said, "I commend my spirit into your hands, Lord Jesus Christ." His head then drifted to the left as he fell unconscious. Edmund Zagorski. He was executed in 2018 by electrocution. He was sentenced to death for the 1983 murders of John Dodson and Jimmy Porter in Robertson County. The 2 men were lured into a wooded hunting area by Zagorski under the pretense of selling them 100 pounds of weed, where they were then shot and had their throats slit. For his final meal, he wanted pickle ham hocks and pigtails. Ronnie Lee Gardner. He was executed in 2010 by a firing squad. The state of Utah sentenced him to death in 1985 for killing a man during an attempt to flee a courthouse. Because of Gardner's case, which was litigated for nearly 25 years, the Utah House of Representatives introduced legislation to restrict the number of appeals in capital cases. Before his execution, he asked for lobster tail, steak, apple pie, and vanilla ice cream, and the viewing of Lord of the Rings. Gerald Lee Mitchell. He was executed by lethal injection in Texas 2001 for murder. Mitchell approached Charles Marino, 20 years old, and his brother-in-law, Kenneth Fleming, 15 years old, in a park in their Houston neighborhood and offered to sell them some weed. Instead, Mitchell forced them to drive to a vacant house after pulling out a sawed-off shotgun. He robbed them of cash and car keys, then shot them both. Fleming survived with an injury to his hip. An eyewitness identified Mitchell leaving the vacant house. Mitchell was later captured in possession of Marino's car and said to the authorities, "I shot the 2 white boys." He gave a written confession admitting the shootings, but claimed they were accidental. Mitchell shot and killed Hector Manguia, 18 years old, the same day he killed Marino. He did that because Manguia refused to give Mitchell a necklace he demanded. Mitchell was 17 years old when the murders occurred. For his final meal, he asked for an assorted bag of Jolly Ranchers candy. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.